At 40, the virgin rancher was still alone, until an old widow begged to stay the night. Rain slammed the tin roof as a stranger pounded on the ranch door, hard enough to sound like danger. Caleb Moore froze with his hand on the lamp, heart beating fast. No one came this far at night unless something was wrong. He opened the door and found an old woman swaying on her feet, soaked to the skin. Her gray hair clung to her face, and her eyes were sharp, despite the fear in them. "Please," she said, "my horse went down. I just need a place till morning." Caleb hesitated. At 40, he had lived alone on this ranch longer than he could remember. He avoided town, avoided people, avoided trouble. Letting someone inside his home felt like opening a gate he had kept locked for decades. But the wind howled, and the woman nearly fell. He stepped aside. "Come in." She crossed the threshold with a deep breath, as if she had escaped something far worse than the storm. Caleb bolted the door behind her without thinking. The woman studied the room, her gaze moving from the old rifle by the wall to the worn table and single chair. "You live alone?" she said. "Yes," Caleb replied. His voice sounded rough to his own ears. He handed her a blanket and pointed to the fire. "Sit." She lowered herself carefully, warming her hands. "Name's Margaret Hale, widow." Caleb nodded. He did not offer his own name. Talking had never been his strength. Outside, thunder cracked so loud the walls shook. Margaret flinched, then straightened. "They were following me," she said suddenly. Caleb's eyes lifted. "Who?" She shook her head. "Men who don't like questions. I heard something I shouldn't have." Caleb's hand drifted toward the rifle. Trouble had a way of finding even those who ran from it. "This land's quiet," he said. "Nobody comes out here." Margaret looked at him closely, as if weighing a choice. "Then let me stay till daylight. After that, I'll be gone." Caleb felt the old pull to say no. Alone was safe. Alone was simple. But something in her voice carried more than fear. It carried urgency. "One night," he said. "That's all." Margaret smiled, small but relieved. "Thank you, rancher." Later, as she slept near the fire, Caleb sat awake, listening. The storm faded, but another sound replaced it. Hooves, slow, careful, too close. Caleb rose and peered through the window. Lantern light moved near the fence line. Someone had followed her after all. His quiet life, careful distance from the world, shattered in that moment. He realized letting her inside had already changed everything. If those men came to his door, he would have to choose between staying hidden or standing his ground. Lantern light drifted closer to the house, slow and steady, like the men carrying it were in no hurry at all. Caleb Moore stood by the window, breathing slow, rifle held low but ready. His mind worked fast, faster than it ever had during long, quiet years on the ranch. Margaret slept by the fire, unaware. Caleb moved across the floor without sound and shook her shoulder gently. "Wake up," he whispered. Her eyes opened sharp and alert, fear returning at once. "They're here?" "Yes." She sat up, pulling the blanket close. "I was hoping they'd lose my trail." Caleb glanced toward the back door. "How many?" Margaret hesitated. 3, maybe 4. Caleb nodded. He did not ask who they were or what they wanted yet. Questions could wait. Survival could not. A knock hit the front door, firm and confident. Not the sound of a lost traveler. Evening. A man's voice called. "We're looking for an old woman traveling alone." Caleb did not answer. Another knock followed, harder. "We know someone's home." Caleb stepped forward and opened the door, just enough to be seen. Rain dripped from the roof, and the lantern light revealed 3 men on horseback. Their faces were calm, too calm. "Evening," Caleb said. "What do you want?" The man in front smiled. "Just passing through. Thought we'd ask if you saw a widow on the road." "No," Caleb said. "Haven't seen anyone." The man's eyes shifted past Caleb, trying to look inside. "Mind if we check?" "Yes," Caleb replied, steady. "This is private land." Silence stretched. The smile faded. "You live alone out here?" the man asked. "Yes. That's a hard life." Caleb did not respond. The man leaned forward in his saddle. "We'll be on our way, but if you do see her, you tell her she owes something that isn't hers to keep." They turned their horses and rode off, disappearing into the dark. Caleb closed the door and locked it. His hands were steady, but his chest felt tight. He turned to Margaret. "They'll be back," she said quietly. "What did you take?" Caleb asked. Margaret stood and faced him. "Not money." "Then what?" "Truth." She moved to the table and sat. "My husband worked for a land company, years ago. They bought property cheap, forced families out. Some deals were hidden. Illegal. My husband found papers and copies, names. When he died, I kept them." Caleb frowned. "Why now?" "Because those men are trying to sell the land again. More families will lose everything. Caleb leaned against the wall. He had avoided town politics, avoided people's problems, yet those problems had come straight to his door. They want the papers, he said, and they won't stop. Caleb stared at the floor, thinking. His ranch sat between valleys, far from lawmen. But he knew the land, every ridge and trail. You can't stay here, he said finally. Not long. Margaret nodded. I didn't plan to. Caleb took a breath. I'll help you reach town by morning. Her eyes widened. You don't have to. I know. Before dawn, Caleb saddled 2 horses. The sky was gray, heavy with mist. Margaret wrapped herself in a coat Caleb had not used in years. They rode through narrow trails, avoiding open ground. Caleb listened to every sound, every bird call. Twice he spotted movement in the distance and changed direction without a word. By midday they reached a dry creek bed. Caleb slowed his horse. We rest here, he said. Margaret nodded, clearly tired. As they dismounted, a sharp whistle cut through the air. Caleb spun, pulling his rifle up. Men stepped from behind rocks, 3 of them, same calm faces. You lead us right to her, the lead man said, smiling again. Caleb stepped in front of Margaret. Leave, the man laughed. This doesn't concern you. It does now. The men spread out slowly. Caleb's mind raced. 1 against 3 was bad odds. Margaret reached into her coat. Caleb, stay back, he said. The man raised his hand. Easy. No one needs to get hurt. Just give us the papers. Caleb glanced at Margaret. She shook her head. They don't stay silent, she said. Once they get them, they'll bury everything. Caleb made a choice. He lifted the rifle and fired at the ground near the men's feet. Dust exploded. Next one won't miss, he said. The men froze, surprise flashing across their faces. They were used to fear, not resistance. A tense moment passed. Then distant voices echoed from the hills. The men cursed under their breath. This isn't over, the leader said. You're making enemies. They retreated, disappearing as fast as they had come. Caleb exhaled slowly. His hands shook now, the danger settling in. Margaret looked at him with something close to gratitude and sadness. You didn't have to stand. Caleb met her gaze. I'm tired of running. They reached town by evening. Sheriff's deputies listened as Margaret laid the papers on the table. Faces hardened as names were read aloud. You did the right thing, the sheriff said. Outside, Margaret turned to Caleb. They'll come after you now. Caleb nodded. Maybe, but this land is mine. She reached for his hand, gripping it gently. Thank you. As she walked towards safety, Caleb stood alone again, but something inside him had shifted. The quiet no longer felt like protection. It felt like something worth defending. Far off, dust rose on the horizon. Caleb mounted his horse and rode home, knowing the fight was only beginning, and his life would never return to what it was before. Caleb returned to the ranch under a sky the color of steel. The ride back felt longer than usual, every sound sharper, every shadow heavier. He knew the men Margaret spoke of would not forget him. People like that never did. The ranch looked the same as always, quiet and empty, but Caleb no longer trusted the silence. He unsaddled his horse and led it to the barn, checking the ground for fresh tracks. He found them near the fence. Hoof marks, recent, careless. Someone had been there while he was gone. Caleb moved slowly, rifle resting against his shoulder. The house door stood closed, but the lock had been scratched. Tested. His chest tightened. He stepped inside. Nothing was taken. But the room felt wrong. The chair had been moved, the table shifted slightly. A message without words. That night, Caleb did not sleep. He sat by the window, lamp low, listening. Memories he had buried began to rise. He had once believed staying alone would keep trouble away. Now he understood that distance only delayed it. At first light, he rode out to check the far pasture. Halfway there, he spotted smoke drifting near the old storage shed. Caleb urged his horse forward. 2 men stood near the shed, searching through crates. When they saw him, they did not run. You're a hard man to scare, one said. Caleb raised his rifle. Leave. The other man smiled thinly. You helped the widow. Bad choice. Caleb's jaw tightened. This is my land. The men exchanged a look. Not for long. They backed away slowly, mounting their horses. We'll be seeing you. Caleb watched them go, anger burning hot in his chest. This was no longer about hiding. It was about holding ground. He rode into town before noon. The sheriff listened carefully, then shook his head. My hands are tied, unless they act first, the sheriff said. Papers are safe, but those men have friends. Caleb nodded. He had expected that. Outside the office, Margaret waited. She looked tired, but strong. They're pushing you, she said. Yes, you don't have to face this alone. Caleb looked at her, surprised. You should leave town. So should you, she replied. But we're both still here. That night, Caleb returned home with a plan forming in his mind. He began repairing old fence lines, clearing brush, reopening trails he had not used in years. He spoke to neighboring ranchers for the first time since his 30s. Most listened, some offered help. Word spread quietly. 3 days later, the men returned. This time, at dusk. 5 of them rode up, stopping just beyond rifle range. The leader raised his voice. We want the land. Sell it, and this ends easy. Caleb stood on his porch, calm. No, the man laughed. You're alone. Caleb whistled sharply. From the hills, shapes appeared. Horses, riders, neighbors who had come when called. The men's smiles faded. This doesn't change anything, the leader said. It changes enough, Caleb replied. The standoff held until night fell. Finally, the men rode away, leaving dust and threats behind. Caleb knew it was not over. Power did not retreat forever. Days later, a fire broke out near the creek, set on purpose. Caleb and the others fought it until dawn, saving the ranch by inches. The message was clear. Margaret came to the ranch that evening. They're desperate, she said. That makes them dangerous. She nodded. But desperate men make mistakes. The mistake came sooner than expected. One morning, Caleb found a stranger waiting by the barn. A young man, nervous, eyes darting. I don't want trouble, the man said. They hired me to watch you. I quit. Caleb listened carefully. That night, Caleb rode out alone, following a trail he now knew well. He reached an abandoned camp deep in the hills. Papers burned in a pit. Names, maps, proof. He gathered what remained and rode straight to town. This time, the sheriff did not hesitate. Deputies moved fast. Arrests followed before sunrise. The leader was caught trying to flee. When it was over, Caleb stood outside the jail as the sun rose. The town felt different, lighter. Margaret stood beside him. You could leave now, she said. Start fresh. Caleb looked toward the horizon, then back at the land he had fought for. No, he said. This is home. Margaret smiled softly. Morning light spread across the ranch, calm and gentle, but Caleb Moore did not trust it. Trouble had passed once, yet he knew deep water often looked quiet on the surface. He moved through his day with care, fixing posts, checking cattle, watching the hills. News from town traveled fast. Some of the men involved had been arrested, but not all. Others had slipped away before the law closed in. Those were the dangerous ones, men with nothing left to lose. By afternoon, Margaret arrived again, riding slowly. She carried a small bag and a look of concern. I heard they moved 2 of them last night, she said. Transferred to another county. Caleb wiped his hands on his jeans. That means pressure. Yes, and pressure makes cracks. They walked the fence line together. Caleb noticed how easily they spoke now. Silence no longer felt heavy between them. It felt shared. That evening, a rider appeared at the far end of the property. Not hiding, not rushing. Caleb watched him approach, rifle ready but lowered. The rider stopped a safe distance away. Message, he called. You're being offered a deal. Caleb said nothing. Sell the ranch, the rider continued. Walk away, no more trouble. Caleb stepped forward. No deal. The rider nodded, as if expecting that answer. Then this ends soon. He turned and rode off. Margaret exhaled slowly. They're not done. No, Caleb said. But neither am I. That night, Caleb did something he had not done in years. He invited people over. Neighbors arrived with lanterns and quiet voices. They sat around the table, sharing plans, watching maps, agreeing on signals and routes. No speeches, just understanding. When the house finally emptied, Margaret stayed behind. You've built something here, she said. More than fences. Caleb looked at the fire. I didn't plan to. Still counts. Just before dawn, dogs barked wildly. Caleb grabbed his rifle and stepped outside. Shapes moved near the south field, too many to count at first glance. Flares lit the night. Men charged the fence line, cutting wire, shouting threats. Horses stampeded, cattle scattered. Caleb fired a warning shot into the air. Others answered from the hills. Neighbors rode in fast, forming lines holding ground. The attackers had expected fear. They met resistance. Chaos spread, but no one crossed the porch line. Caleb stood firm, calm in the storm. He shouted orders, guided people to safe positions, moved like a man who knew his land by heart. A truck engine roared near the creek. Someone tried to break through. Caleb mounted his horse and rode hard, reaching the spot just as the truck stalled in mud. 2 men jumped out, surprised to see him so close. This is over, Caleb said. One man laughed. Not yet. Sirens cut through the noise. Town deputies arrived from the ridge, lights flashing. The men froze, then ran. By sunrise, it was done. Fences damaged, fields torn. But the ranch still stood. The sheriff approached Caleb, face tired but firm. "We've got enough now. Witnesses, reports. It's finished." Caleb nodded, exhaustion settling deep. Margaret stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm. "You stayed. Yes, you could have walked away." Caleb looked across the land, broken but alive. "I finally understand something," he said. "Being alone didn't protect me. Standing did." Days passed, repairs began. Help came without asking. Food appeared on the porch. Smiles replaced suspicion in town. Margaret prepared to leave. Her work was done, papers filed, truth exposed. They stood near the gate as her horse waited. "You'll be fine," she said. "So will you." She hesitated. "I won't be far." Caleb watched her ride away, a familiar ache rising. But this time, it did not feel like loss. It felt like space waiting to be filled. That night, Caleb sat on the porch alone, stars bright above him. The ranch was quiet again, but it was a different quiet now, strong, earned. He knew life would not slow down for him anymore. And for the first time, he did not want it to. The wind carried the smell of pine and dust as Caleb Moore walked the ridge above his ranch. Morning had a crisp edge, sunlight cutting through clouds that promised more rain. He felt the familiar pulse of the land under his boots, each step reminding him why he had stayed, why he had fought. Life had returned, but not the way it had been. Silence no longer meant safety, it meant opportunity. Caleb had learned that a quiet life was fragile, that danger could find even the most isolated places. Yet, the ranch had survived, and he had survived with it. He rode out to check the fence lines, noting where the storm and attacks had left damage. The repairs were ongoing, but neighbors had offered help, and the young men from town, inspired by his stand, came without asking. Caleb realized for the first time that this community, once distant, was now woven into the land he defended. Margaret had left town days ago, but her presence lingered. Letters arrived with news. The illegal land deals were under investigation. The men who had tried to intimidate her and Caleb were in custody, and new settlers were claiming plots that had been unfairly taken years before. Caleb smiled quietly to himself. Justice, slow as it moved, had arrived. By late afternoon he returned to the barn. His horse whinnied softly as he entered, nudging him for attention. Caleb brushed the animal, his hands steady, methodical. The rhythm of chores grounded him, made him feel like the world was still predictable, until the sound of hooves interrupted his focus. He looked up and saw a rider approaching. A young woman, mounted confidently. She slowed as she reached the gate, tipping her hat. "Mornin', Rancher Moore," she called. "Mornin'," Caleb replied. "Curious? Can I help you?" She smiled faintly. "Name's Clara Bennett. Heard about what happened here. Thought I'd see if you might need some hands. Ranching isn't easy for one person." Caleb studied her. Strong shoulders, determined eyes, confident posture. She reminded him of himself in his younger years, and perhaps of Margaret too. Someone who didn't ask permission to fight for what was right. "You're welcome to help," he said finally. "Chores never end." Clara dismounted smoothly, tying her horse and walking beside him. "I can handle myself," she said lightly, "and I work fast." Together they rode across the fields, repairing fences and moving livestock. Caleb noticed the way she handled the animals, firm but gentle, and how easily she adapted to the rhythm of ranch life. It was rare to find someone who understood the balance between strength and patience, and Caleb found himself silently approving every action. Evening fell, and they returned to the house. Caleb lit the fire, and Clara helped set out food he had prepared earlier. They ate in quiet companionship, comfortable in the simplicity of shared work. As night deepened, a distant howl cut through the silence. Caleb tensed for a moment, old instincts flaring. But the land was safe. The threat that had haunted him was gone, replaced by a new kind of challenge. Rebuilding, protecting, and trusting again. Clara looked at him, her eyes thoughtful. "You've done well, keeping this place safe. Not just for yourself, but for everyone who relies on it." Caleb nodded. "It wasn't easy. I thought being alone would keep trouble away, but it doesn't. Standing your ground does." She smiled softly. "Then you'll be ready for whatever comes next." Days turned into weeks. The ranch thrived. Caleb trained new hands, repaired barns, and restored pastures. Clara stayed, proving herself with every task, becoming part of the rhythm of life Caleb had once carried alone. Late one afternoon, Caleb rode the far ridge, scanning the horizon. Dust clouds rose in the distance, and his heart tightened at first. But this time, it was not enemies. It was settlers bringing animals, supplies, and friends. The land had begun to heal, the community taking root, and Caleb felt a deep sense of satisfaction he had never known. He returned to the house where Clara was feeding the animals. She looked up and waved. the sun catching her hair, casting a warm glow. Caleb felt a rare warmth spread through him. After decades of solitude, of constant vigilance, of fearing that opening his door might bring disaster, he realized he had something more valuable than safety: connection. That evening, Margaret visited again. She rode slowly into the yard, now smiling, carrying news of the ongoing investigations and the restoration of stolen lands. She dismounted gracefully, greeting Caleb and Clara. "You've done it," she said, looking around the ranch. "This place is alive again." Caleb nodded. "We've done it." Margaret glanced at Clara, noticing the young woman's presence and ease. "And you found someone to help carry the load." Clara smiled, but it was Caleb's eyes Margaret studied. He had changed. Older, wiser, more confident, less burdened by fear. He stood taller, shoulders squared, no longer weighed by isolation. "Life out here is different," Margaret said softly, "but it suits you, and it suits the land." They shared stories that night, laughter echoing across the fields, a sound Caleb had not heard in years. The storm of the past had left scars, but the future was bright, full of potential, full of life. Over the following months, Caleb continued to strengthen his ranch. He trained horses, taught young men and women how to care for livestock, and rebuilt the fences that once fell to threats. Clara remained by his side, her presence steady and reliable, a companion in the work and the quiet evenings. Winter approached, snow dusted the hills, and the ranch settled into a calm rhythm. Caleb often sat by the fire at night, rifle set aside, watching flames dance and reflecting on what had changed. He no longer feared the night. He had faced danger, survived it, and learned that strength was more than muscle. It was courage, community, and persistence. One evening, as snow fell lightly outside, Caleb and Clara sat on the porch, sharing a simple meal. The wind sang through the trees, but inside, the warmth of the fire and shared laughter filled the space. Caleb realized he had never felt more at peace. Clara leaned back, smiling. "This place has heart, and so do you." Caleb glanced at her, surprised at the truth in her words. "I used to think being alone was strength. Now I know it's the opposite." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the snow cover the land. Caleb felt something he hadn't felt in decades: hope. A week later, Margaret returned to visit again. She and Caleb walked the ridge together, looking down over the ranch. "You've created a legacy here," she said. "Not just fences and fields, but life, community, and justice." Caleb nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. He understood now that the battles he had fought were never just for survival. They were for freedom, for truth, and for the chance to live fully, without fear. By the time the sun set, casting gold and red across the hills, Caleb knew the future would be different. He would no longer hide from the world. He would meet it, protect what mattered, and build something lasting. And he would not be alone. Clara stood beside him, firm and strong, sharing in the quiet triumph. The ranch, once a solitary refuge, had become a place of hope, safety, and promise. Caleb felt the rhythm of life in every corner, the hum of animals, the whisper of the wind, the steady beat of his own heart. For the first time in 40 years, Caleb Moore looked at his land and smiled. The ranch was alive, the threats gone, and the horizon open. He had survived storms, enemies, and fear, and in the process he had found connection, purpose, and strength. The night fell peacefully. Stars twinkled above, mirrored by the lights from the ranch. Caleb sat on the porch, Clara beside him, Margaret gone for now, and the land breathing softly beneath them. He no longer feared solitude. He no longer feared the future. He had built something stronger than isolation. And as the wind whispered across the hills, carrying the promise of new days, Caleb knew one thing clearly. He would never be alone again. The virgin rancher, once isolated and wary, had finally found the people, purpose, and peace that made life worth living. The ranch stood firm, the fires of resilience still burning, and the horizon stretched wide and free, just like the man who had fought to protect it.